Hello family, welcome to Stories by Tochi. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please subscribe and drop a like for us. This generosity would go a long way for us. Also share to family and friends. And please turn on post notification to stay tuned for more. Thank you as you do so. Now let's get into the story. Everyone in Ajigunal had a story, but Candy's own moved through the streets like perfume on a windy day, sweet, strong, and hard to forget. People didn't just know her, they noticed her. Not because she spoke too much or caused trouble, but because she carried herself like Lagos owed her something. She walked like money should follow her. Her skin was soft and pale, like unripe pawpaw, and she had a small, curved frame that made her look younger than she was. Candy didn't belong to Ajigunal, not in her mind. She believed she was only passing through it the way a plane passes through clouds, never to land, only to soar. Her mother, a retired headmistress who once ruled a whole school with just her eyes, often shook her head when Candy passed the mirror twice before leaving the house. "This one will learn the hard way," she used to mutter. But Candy never listened. Her head was too full of dreams and wigs, and how to snap the perfect picture at the right angle. She believed struggle was optional, and that suffering was a story for girls who didn't know how to use what they had. There were girls who chased jobs, applied for grants, and saved every kobo like it was their last. But Candy saw them as fools carrying water in baskets. While others toiled under the sun, Candy stayed in front of ring lights and filters, curating a life she hadn't earned but wore like perfume. She wasn't loud about it, no. She moved with quiet confidence, the kind that made people assume she had a rich uncle abroad or maybe won a lottery. The truth? Candy had found her own kind of hustle, and it wasn't in CVs or certificates. It was in knowing who to smile at, when to answer DMs, and how to dress like you already belonged to the room. She never said much about what she did, only that God's grace had located her. Sometimes she'd add a vague caption like "another one secured" under a photo of a new bag or a foreign shoe. The people who knew better just looked away, and the ones who didn't, well, they cheered, screens lit up with fire emojis and applause. But Lagos has a way of peeling back your masks, and Candy, so full of charm and secrets, was walking on ice under a sun that never stopped burning. At 24, Candy had already moved from her mother's small flat near Boundary Market to a serviced apartment on the mainland, where the air smelled of air freshener and ambition. Her neighbors never saw her bring home shopping bags, but somehow, her wardrobe stayed updated with pieces only influencers wore. Candy believed every man was a potential investor if you knew how to package your pitch. Hers just didn't need PowerPoint. There was always someone, some older man with graying beards and secrets to hide, willing to sponsor the illusion. Her first relationship was with a furniture tycoon who told her she reminded him of his late wife. She never asked how the wife died, only took the money and booked her next facial. By the time she met the man who would rewrite her story completely, Candy had already built a little empire of lies, soft lies, decorated in lace and filtered through rose gold stories. She had started preaching too, encouraging young girls to be independent, to chase the bag, not the man. She even posted a quote once that read, "Sleeping your way to the top is outdated." The irony was not lost on the street, but Candy had fans, and in this city, a good lie, well told, was just another version of the truth. There were whispers, of course. Ajigunal has ears that even walls envy. The market women said things behind wrappers, and the bike men cracked jokes when she passed. "See who day teach motivation online, but now lecky husband she day chop," one said once, not knowing Candy had walked past just seconds before. But she never reacted. She was too focused on curating a life that would one day swallow her whole. She started going to events, soft launches, fashion mixers, birthday parties for people she barely knew. She smiled at the right photographers, waved at the right tables, and always left early enough to remain a mystery. Candy wanted to be admired, not questioned. And Lagos, ever hungry for fresh faces, gave her that stage. But beneath the flawless makeup and silk dresses, a crack had already begun to form. One that no concealer could fix. Because Candy wasn't building a life, she was borrowing one. And in Lagos, borrowed things have a way of finding their way back to the owner. His name didn't need an introduction in the circles where wealth and quiet power danced hand in hand. Ryan Okenwa was the kind of man whose presence turned a whole room serious. He wasn't loud. He wasn't young. But his confidence had weight, the kind that couldn't be bought or borrowed. In Lagos, where everyone is trying to impress someone, Ryan had long stopped trying. At 42, his edges had silvered slightly at the temples, but the way he wore his suits and controlled his tone gave the impression of someone who knew too much and said too little. His fortune came from real estate, massive developments stretching across Lekki and Victoria Island, buildings that glittered like secrets at night. He had a wife, Lydia, who was respected more for her silence than her social media presence. She was never loud, never showy, but always seen where it mattered. Their marriage, to outsiders, looked polished and unshakable, like one of those imported vases that sat on their living room console. But like most things displayed for admiration, there were cracks, quiet, careful cracks that Candy would unknowingly press her fingers into. The first time Ryan laid eyes on Candy, it wasn't even her beauty that caught him. It was her stillness in the middle of chaos. The event had been one of those curated Lagos functions, an art gallery opening where the drinks were expensive and the laughter was performative. She stood alone by a painting no one cared about, sipping red wine like she had a past to forget. That poise, that calm in the middle of noise, drew him in. He asked her name, not expecting much, but the way she said Candy, with a hint of pride and mischief, made something in him stir. She didn't flirt aggressively or push for attention, which, ironically, made her unforgettable. He didn't tell her he was married, not because he was hiding it, but because he knew she wouldn't ask. Candy never asked questions that didn't lead to opportunity. They met again a week later. This time privately. A drink turned into dinner, and dinner became the start of something neither of them would admit they needed. Candy saw Ryan as her stepping stone to the world she longed for. No complications, no strings, just benefits. And Ryan saw her as a brief escape from a life that had become too predictable. Neither of them planned for their little arrangement to grow teeth. He started with small gestures. The first gift was a rose gold wristwatch she wore in an Instagram post with the caption, "If he doesn't spoil you, you're drinking water beside the river." Her followers swooned. He liked the way she hid him in plain sight. Then came the weekend getaways, Obudu, Dubai, even Cape Town once. Always discreet, always under the radar. Candy played her part to perfection. She never demanded. She never exposed him. She even blocked his number whenever she posted motivational content. It was a performance, and she was flawless. Ryan, on the other hand, began stretching his lies at home. Business meetings ran later. His eyes darted away when Lydia looked too deeply. But Lydia, smart and seasoned, didn't scream. She knew the smell of infidelity, not because she'd been cheated on before, but because a woman learns to recognize when she is no longer her husband's piece. Candy had no clue how close the fire was getting. All she saw was the new life she'd imagined as a teenager now unfolding before her. Expensive clothes, VIP events, the white Lexus that made heads turn. She had started taking herself more seriously, too. Walked differently. Spoke more slowly. Posted less, but posted well. If anyone asked, she was an entrepreneur. Her bio said brand influencer, CEO, lifestyle enthusiast. It didn't matter that her CEO title had no business to back it. She was living her soft life, and in Lagos, appearances are just as valuable as reality. Things began to shift the day Lydia stumbled upon a bank alert, and 2.8 million sent to an account labeled simply as CM Logistics. It wasn't the amount that bothered her. Ryan had spent far more on business. It was the timing. The same day he claimed to be in Abuja, she had seen his cologne bottle missing from the dresser, the travel bag he took only on special trips gone. She made no scene. Instead, she opened a private folder on her phone titled Observations. The name Candy soon appeared in it. She began to connect dots. A bracelet she saw in a friend's reposted story, the one she remembered buying for Ryan's niece, now on another woman's wrist. The white car parked discreetly behind a Lekki Phase 1 apartment, the same model Ryan had casually said he was test driving for work. Lydia's calm turned cold. She hired a man she trusted, not a private investigator, but someone more ordinary. A Bolt driver who also worked part-time as a technician. Someone invisible. Within weeks, she had pictures. A video. Proof. Still, she said nothing. Lydia was not interested in noise. She wanted clarity. And when the right moment came, she would collect everything that belonged to her, even the lies. And Candy, with her soft steps and filtered life, had no idea she was being watched from the shadows by the one woman who had the power to rewrite her fate. The air in Lagos always had a way of pressing in on people, like it carried secrets in the heat. For Candy, life had become a steady melody of soft lies and harder truths buried beneath foundation and good lighting. She had found her rhythm. Morning coffee in bed she didn't brew herself. Voice notes sent with a soft tone meant to keep the man paying her bills feeling important. and afternoon shoots where she posed and borrowed joy, making the world believe she had built everything from scratch. The white Lexus parked neatly outside her Lecky apartment wasn't just transportation. It was a trophy, a statement, a carefully painted lie. Her neighbors barely saw her smile at anyone, but she walked with the kind of air that made others second-guess their own efforts. And the irony? She didn't even know who she was anymore when the filters came off. She gave advice to other women online, words that didn't belong to her but sounded believable enough. Ladies, protect your peace. Don't lower your standards. Hard work pays always. The more she lied, the more people believed. She had become both the performance and the audience, clapping for herself in a world she curated out of nothing but access and charm. And in a city like Lagos, that was almost enough. But the thing about lies is that they're rarely silent forever. Candy's performance might have fooled the masses, but it had begun to irritate the very people she tried hardest to resemble. Those who genuinely worked for their lives could smell the falseness on her breath. Women she called sis, in captions whispered behind her. Industry girls who shared influencer spaces with her would scoff when she walked in, but still smiled for group pictures. She pretended not to notice. Pretense was her strongest muscle, well developed from years of stretching the truth. But even she knew deep down that something had started to shift. The silence around her was growing louder. Opportunities started to slow. Event invites that used to come with VIP tags started arriving late, or not at all. One brand deal she had silently hoped would come through ended up going to another girl with fewer followers, but more transparency. She began to overcompensate, bigger hair, louder captions, riskier photos. But it only made the cracks wider. She didn't know it yet, but she had begun to lose the very thing that had once made her untouchable, control over her story. The wheel was slipping from her hands, and all the glitter she had poured into her image was beginning to reveal the rust underneath. Lydia, on the other hand, had not moved emotionally, but mentally, she had crossed several bridges Candy didn't even know existed. She still played her part as the devoted wife, still cooked on Sundays, still asked her husband about his day. But her eyes held a stillness that unsettled Ryan more than any shouting would have. He noticed the change. She no longer asked questions he expected her to ask. No accusations. No passive remarks. Just calm. And in that calm, Ryan felt fear. Lydia had never been the confrontational type, but she was sharp enough to collect information like jewelry and wear it silently until it served her. She had started moving pieces behind the scenes, quietly. The driver she asked to trace Candy's movements? Paid in full. The receipts she downloaded from their joint account and quietly stored? Dated and documented. She wasn't gathering proof for confrontation, she was collecting silence for impact. And every day Candy posed near the Lexus, every time she tweeted about integrity or working hard, Lydia watched from her private profile, eyes narrowed, heart slowing. Not because she was angry. She had already passed that stage. What she was now was patient, and patience, in the hands of a wounded woman, is never peaceful. It is war disguised as a waiting room. Candy remained unaware. To her, things were just a little off, not dangerous. She thought Ryan was only being distant because of business stress. She assumed her online engagement was dropping because of algorithm changes. She didn't think anything of the Bolt driver who looked too closely at her one Thursday night as she returned from a lounge in Victoria Island. She barely noticed the familiar perfume smell when she passed a woman in a shop who brushed past her too quickly. Everything was still manageable, or so she thought. But slowly, a storm was gathering, and she couldn't see it because the sky still looked blue. She kept her routines, replied messages with emojis, made playlists for her soft life, and planned content calendars with photos of bubble baths and quotes from Maya Angelou. She had no idea that someone was tightening the noose, not around her neck, but around her story. And when a woman like Lydia moves, she doesn't shake tables. She flips them. Candy was still dancing in the room, not knowing the floorboards had started to crack, and Lagos, ever watchful, was waiting, not to warn her, but to witness. There are moments when Lagos no longer feels like a city, but a theater where the actors don't know they're being watched. Candy didn't notice the weight of eyes anymore. She had become too accustomed to being seen, even when she didn't know who was looking. Her life moved in curated loops. Wake up late, repost her old content with fresh captions, schedule a shoot, and then send her gratitude to a man whose name she never typed in public. Everything around her looked stable, but beneath her foundation was a restlessness she couldn't name. Ryan had started pulling back. Not completely, just enough to make her question if someone else had taken her place in his secret world. He still sent money, still called her on Tuesday nights with that low, tired voice that made her feel chosen, but there was a new silence between his words. And Candy, with all her confidence, had no tools to fix a man who was no longer fully present. She texted more than she used to, laughed harder during calls, and posted indirect quotes about appreciation and effort, hoping he'd notice. But Ryan had already begun placing mental distance between them, not out of guilt, but because his reality was shifting in a way that made Candy feel like a mistake rather than an indulgence. The moment came like a whisper, disguised as a casual errand. Lydia had asked one of her cousins, a blunt-faced woman from Mushin who never smiled without reason, to drive her to a boutique in Lecky. She didn't mention that the boutique was just 2 doors down from the salon Candy frequented. It was a weekday late afternoon, the sun still sharp enough to irritate the skin. Lydia wore a simple dress, not flashy, not frumpy, just clean, quiet, and deliberate. Her cousin parked where visibility was perfect. They waited. Candy arrived on time, as always, stepping out of a rideshare car that reeked of air freshener and ambitions. Her walk was as it had always been, measured, self-aware, confident without apology. She had no idea she had walked into a setup that had been planned for 3 weeks. Lydia didn't get out of the car at first. She watched. The woman her husband had spoiled with her silence now stood laughing with a hairstylist outside the salon, tossing her phone between her hands like her life couldn't shatter. Lydia opened the door slowly. The sun hit her face as she walked across the pavement with the kind of calm that made men nervous. When Candy saw her, her smile froze halfway across her lips. Confusion, then disbelief, then something close to fear registered in her eyes. Lydia didn't greet her. She didn't insult her. She simply raised her hand, and the first slap landed like judgment from the sky. The crowd that gathered did not form slowly. Lagos people have a sense for drama, a radar that activates whenever pride meets consequence in broad daylight. Phones came out. Voices began to hum. Some recorded, others just stared, drawn by the raw energy of disgrace in motion. Lydia didn't scream. She didn't have to. Her eyes did the speaking. She pointed at the Lexus parked across the road and asked, in a voice that was both quiet and thunderous, "Should I tell them how you got the car, or will you?" Candy stood there, frozen, arms at her sides, lips trembling without words. Her lace wig had shifted, and her heels made her stance unsteady, as if her lies had finally unbalanced her. One of Lydia's cousins stepped in, took the car keys from Candy's unresisting hand, and entered the driver's seat. She reversed slowly, the engine humming like a sigh of relief. The car pulled away. The crowd parted for it, as if it were royalty returning to its rightful home. Someone in the back muttered, "Nawa." Another person said, "She done finally jam her match." Candy didn't respond. Her eyes just followed the car until it disappeared. Lydia didn't slap her again. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. She turned, walked back to the car she came in, and left Candy standing on the same pavement she had once floated across like a queen. After the dust settled and the phone stopped recording, Candy remained exactly where the shame had left her, barely blinking, trying to gather herself from a ground that refused to hold her up. The salon worker she had been chatting with earlier avoided her gaze. The street that once made way for her refused to look her in the eye. Her phone vibrated in her bag, probably someone sending her the video she was already starring in, but she didn't reach for it. For the first time in a long while, Candy felt naked. Not in the physical sense, but in the way someone feels when the truth finally strips them down to nothing. Her curated confidence had cracked. The reality she thought she could bend had snapped back into place. And now, she wasn't just embarrassed, she was exposed. She left the salon not with a car, not with a sense of pride, but with 2 broken earrings in her pocket and the sound of silent judgment ringing louder than any insult. And as she crossed the road to find a taxi home, her legs weak, her stomach empty, one thing burned quietly in her mind. She had built a life on air, and someone had just pulled the plug. She didn't know where to go, but she knew one place she couldn't return to, her own Instagram page. Lagos didn't need newspapers to spread a story. Before the day turned into evening, Candy's name was already being carried from phone to phone, voice note to voice note, like smoke drifting through crowded rooms. The video of the confrontation had been posted on 3 gossip blogs by 4 p.m., and by 6 p.m., it had been reposted across thousands of pages with blurry captions like "Fake Life Done Cast." Even those who didn't know her face knew her name by nightfall. Some recognized her immediately. Others needed only a few seconds before putting two and two together. The girl with the white Lexus. The one who preached about dignity and discipline. The motivational speaker with designer bags and Bible quotes. Comments rolled in like angry waves, some mocking, others disappointed. A few tried to defend her, but their voices drowned under the noise. Gandhi, stay up for line. Not because she didn't want to explain, but because for the first time, words wouldn't save her. She sat in the back of a Bolt ride, phone on silent, scarf wrapped loosely around her hair. The driver kept looking at her through the mirror, not because he recognized her, but because he sensed something broken sitting quietly in his back seat. And in that ride, through the chaotic traffic of Third Mainland Bridge, Candy didn't say a word. She just watched the sky darken over the lagoon, her reflection on the window no longer familiar. Her apartment, once a space of filtered light and expensive fragrance, now felt too wide, too quiet, too empty. She threw her bag on the floor, sat on the edge of her couch, and stared at the wall. It was still painted cream, still decorated with canvas art she once posted online with the caption "Soft Life Loading." Now it just looked cheap. The silence inside the room wasn't peaceful, it was haunting. Her phone had vibrated at least 20 times, but she didn't check it. She already knew what the messages would be: mockery from strangers, silence from friends, and probably a voice note from Ryan she couldn't bear to hear. The soft life she once staged had turned its back on her. The brands that once reposted her had unfollowed. The girls who used to comment "Slay Queen" under her pictures now shared her downfall in group chats. Nobody wanted to be associated with her. Image was everything, and hers had been shattered under Lagos sunlight. She stood up eventually, walked to the mirror, and looked at herself. The lashes were crooked. Her foundation was stained from tears she hadn't realized she cried. But it wasn't the makeup that disturbed her, it was the woman looking back. For years, she had built a version of herself that didn't exist. And now, stripped of filters and borrowed comfort, she had to face the real Candy. The one who once laughed at job applications, the one who chose shortcuts over self-respect, the one whose silence had betrayed the very people she preached to. She touched the mirror gently and whispered, "Who are you now?" She tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the parking lot, to Lydia's face, to the sound of her own breathing in that moment when everything she owned had been reduced to shame. She thought of calling her mother, but what would she say? That she was caught with a married man? That the car she had bragged about for months was never hers? That the shame she brought home was too loud to hide under her mattress? No, she couldn't do that. Her mother had warned her. Not with lectures, but with silence, the kind that speaks louder than correction. Candy had always ignored her. She believed Lagos would protect her ambition. But Lagos was never kind. It only tolerates you until it's bored, then chews you out like expired chewing gum. She scrolled through her camera roll, hoping to delete something, anything, but even her pictures betrayed her. Every smile looked forced. Every caption felt ridiculous. She thought about deleting her account altogether, but that felt like a confession. And Candy never confessed. So she locked her phone, lay on the floor, and listened to the distant hum of a generator from the next building. And for the first time since she moved to Lekki, Candy cried not because she was hurt, but because she finally understood how much she had lied to herself. Morning came like punishment. She had barely slept, but the sun came anyway, slipping through the cheap blinds and resting on her face like a cruel reminder. She opened her eyes slowly, hoping it was all a dream. But the silence confirmed it. She was no longer that girl. The calls had stopped. No messages. No updates. Just a feed full of reminders that life was moving without her. Candy sat up, looked around her apartment, and began packing. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. Everything inside the room reminded her of who she had pretended to be. The wine glasses, the perfume bottles, the unopened planner with the words 2025 goals stamped in gold. She packed them in silence. By afternoon, she ordered a van with her last savings. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no one left to say it to. Her neighbors watched from their windows, some curious, others indifferent. Candy didn't care. She wore a face mask and dark glasses, not for COVID, but for shame. When the van pulled out of the compound, no one waved. No one asked where she was going. And Candy didn't look back. She had learned something about Lagos. It claps for you when you rise, but it records when you fall. And once the clapping stops, the silence can choke you. The new apartment was nothing like the old one. Gone were the scented candles, the marble countertops, and the echo of stilettos on polished floors. This one had peeling paint in the corners and curtains that refused to hang straight no matter how many times she fixed them. There was no air conditioning, only a dusty ceiling fan that wheezed when it spun, like it was complaining about its own existence. Candy sat on the edge of a worn mattress, staring at the lone plastic chair in the room, as though it owed her an explanation. She hadn't touched her phone in days. The SIM card was removed, tucked into a box of old receipts and tangled jewelry she could no longer wear without feeling exposed. Outside her window, a woman argued with her son about N50 change, and the distant sound of a church speaker rang through the air with a cracked voice singing about redemption. Candy listened, not because she believed, but because the silence inside her had become too heavy to bear. She no longer lived in Lekki or Aja. Now she was in Ajij, where the streets didn't know her name, and that, in itself, was a kind of relief. She had been forgotten, not forgiven, just quietly removed from the feed. There were no more mirror selfies, no more outfit transitions synced to music, no more half-hearted affirmations typed beneath edited photos. The online world moved on without her. The same people who once reposted her photos now followed someone else, someone younger, someone louder. Candy didn't resent them. She understood it now. Clout was currency in Lagos, and the moment yours expired, the city treated you like a bounced check. She had become her own cautionary tale. Not the type they turned into podcasts or documentaries, but the kind that got told in hushed tones between cousins. You remember that Candy girl? The one with the car? Dem say na married man get him oh. It stung, but not in the way she expected. What pained her the most was that the lie she told herself for so long, that she was in control, that she could keep the line between reality and performance clean, had been the very lie that destroyed her. Every day she walked to the small market near the junction to buy foodstuff with cash tucked in her bra. She passed girls who reminded her of herself 2 years ago. Loud laughter, lashes too long, conversations filled with slang and fake accents. And every time a quiet voice whispered, "You two used to sound like that." It wasn't judgment. It was recognition. And Candy, now stripped of everything, had finally become her own audience. The hardest part wasn't the loss of luxury, or even the betrayal of a man who never truly promised her loyalty. It was the absence of identity. Who was she now that the world had stopped watching? Who was she without the filters, without the follows, without the life that others envied? She didn't have answers, only routine. She woke up early, not because she had anywhere to go, but because she couldn't sleep past 5 a.m. anymore. She washed her clothes with her hands, ironed them with the same care she once gave to her red carpet looks, and cooked rice in small pots with broken handles. She didn't cry often, not because she was strong, but because she was numb. There was nothing left to mourn. She thought of Lydia sometimes, not with hate, but with the kind of distant gratitude one feels towards a mirror that finally showed them the truth. Lydia hadn't ruined her life, she had interrupted the lie. Candy knew this now. And as she sat on her mattress, scrolling through old photos she couldn't bring herself to delete, she whispered something quietly to herself, like a secret prayer. At least now I know. Not what she would become, not how she would bounce back, but simply that the illusion had ended. And knowing that truth, however painful, was more valuable than all the gifts she had once received under silence. Time passed. Not dramatically, just in slow, ordinary days that began to blend into each other. People in the area got used to seeing her. They didn't know her story, only that she minded her business and never bargained too hard in the market. A woman who ran a provisions shop near her compound took a liking to her, often giving her extra sachets of tomato paste or offering stools to sit when the sun became too hot. Candy never spoke much. She just smiled, small and polite, like someone still learning how to be alive again. There were moments, brief and fragile, when she thought about starting something. A small business, maybe. Nothing loud. Nothing for the camera. Just something that was hers. Something that didn't need approval from strangers or validation from men. She didn't rush the thought. She let it sit quietly in her chest, like an idea afraid to be born too soon. And as the days stretched into weeks, and the noise of her past life faded deeper into memory, Candy began to understand that survival wasn't about rebranding. It was about honesty. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. She just needed to breathe one quiet, ordinary day at a time. In a world that moves fast and praises appearances, don't trade your peace for praise. Don't let desperation blind you to dignity. It's okay to start small, to grow slowly, and to work hard for a life that you can sleep peacefully in. Never envy a journey you don't understand, because not all glitter comes from gold, and not all success is sweet behind closed doors. Choose truth. Choose peace. Choose a life that doesn't need to be hidden. May your hands never lack honest blessings. May you never walk a path that will end in shame. May the peace that passes understanding follow you like a shadow. May you attract favor that doesn't come with secret tears. May your name never be dragged where your character was never sent. May the life you build be loud in joy and silent in disgrace. May God send you helpers who don't ask you to lose yourself to be saved. And may your story always end in restoration, never regret. If you believe it, type Amen, and let it be so. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Turn on post notifications. See you on our next story.